All right, guys, I think we're good to go. So good evening. Thank you all very much for coming to this LJC event tonight. My name is Stuart, and I work at REPWorks. For those of you that don't know, which I'm sure isn't too many, the LJC was founded back in 2007. We've now grown to over 5,000 members. We've got events roughly once a week, sometimes more, and it's all around helping people develop their skills and their knowledge in Java. So as I said, as REPWorks, we organize a lot of these events. A lot of our time is spent building community, organizing events, assisting with mentoring, that sort of thing, bringing on amazing speakers. So sliding that enthusiasm tonight. So we also help clients source some of the best developers in London, many of whom are here. So if you are looking for a role, or some just even career CV mentoring advice, just feel free to come and find myself or Alan and Jacob in the back there. We are wearing the really fetching t-shirts. So please give a warm welcome to Daniel Bryant, who will be talking about the 7 more deadly sins of microservices. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. Did everyone hear me okay? Sound good at the moment? Looks good as well. So this talk will be 45 minutes long. I'll try and keep the pace, or Simon will somehow electronically get me off the stage, I'm sure. So welcome, yes, the 7 deadly sins, and 7 more deadly sins of microservices. I've actually done a version of this talk at DEVOPS UK last year, DEVOPS UK, awesome conference if you're looking for that, and QCon NYC. Out of curiosity, has anyone seen those talks before? A couple. That's good. Good. So I have completely rejigged this version because I wasn't sure people would have seen it before. I'm trying to tweak it towards the Java audience. I'm a Java developer as well. Do a bunch of other things, which I'll mention in a minute. But these are the 7 more deadly sins of microservices, which we're going to cover over the next 45 minutes. Okay? I'll present all that good stuff. And please tweet at the VJug as well, get them involved. I work in a company called Open Freedom. We're a consultancy company based in London. I also am doing a CTO role with Specto Labs. We're a company focused on solutions and products around microservice dependency management and microservice testing. So come and ask me more at the end. I'd love to come along to conferences like this or meetups like this. Love to share knowledge. Basically, the LJC, pivotal moment in my career was when I joined the LJC, 2011, 2012. Met some awesome people. Shout out to Martin back there, top dude I met. Martin's written several books, which I really liked, and then actually got to meet the fella, which is good. And then it was a really pivotal moment in my career. So I highly recommend everyone in the room, people watching it on VJug, get involved in their local jug, get involved more in VJug. Totally will change your career if you wanted to. It's really cool to have a community of people. Anyway, let's get cracking. So microservices. I'm hoping so many of you have heard of microservices. It's like super hype, yeah. Everyone like microservices? We're good. These are the 2 definitions I like. Kind of like Amy Kochhoff. Lot of awesome work around this. Like loosely coupled Solar with bounded context and domain-driven design, that kind of thing. And applications that fit in your head. That for me is nice. Yeah? Applications that I can understand as a developer, I can understand readily. I'm sure many of us have worked on the monolith where you just look at the code base and are like, it's going to take me years to understand this. Microservices, exact opposite. Should be able to understand very quick. This is a great talk I saw about a year ago now, I think, from Marty. Marty works in the API Academy, CA, and he talks about the evolution of microservices. So for me, this is really key. It's like agile software development, continuous delivery, DevOps, and then we kind of needed agility around architecture, and that's when microservices kind of popped up. Now, what I would add is these things are pretty much prerequisites for microservices. If you're getting the full benefits of microservices, you really need agile. Waterfall microservices, continuous delivery, DevOps. Martin Fowler's talked about this stuff a lot. But it's a great video to understand how how the evolution of microservices has happened, which I like to look at the past to know where the future should be going. But let's dive straight into the deadly sins. Hopefully, many of you are familiar with what the deadly sins are. The first one is lust, and it's using the latest and greatest technology. Yeah, it's developers like shiny magpie. Now, new technology is great pretty much until it isn't, yeah? And just a heads up, this has been me many times, yeah? Docker, cloud, that kind of thing, yeah? And I'm cursing new technology. But the reality is technology, yeah? It's neither good or bad, really. We need to learn how to use it. And evaluation for me is a key skill. If I'm bringing in something to the tech stack, be it a new framework, be it Docker, be it clouds, these kind of things, and microservices, pretty much the same thing. If I'm bringing in a new architectural style, I need to understand the principles. Don't just copy blindly because someone told you at the meetup, microservices are cool. Ignore that guy, yeah? That kind of thing. One of the key things in microservices I'm seeing is people aren't understanding the core principles of what I believe are kind of microservices. It's not building things around business functionality. So people are trying to map, say, EJBs or middle tier directly to microservices. And really, microservices are premised on bounded context from domain-driven design. It's something called self-contained systems, kind of similar thing, but you really need to understand sort of the fundamentals of microservices. I'm seeing people build mini monoliths now as well, yeah, using heavyweight tech, the same principles and so forth. And yeah, they might be slightly smaller, but they're really just mini monoliths, yeah. And this presentation I saw, well, that kind of sums it up to me. This is the worst case scenario, and I've actually seen this. People putting stuff in Docker and saying it's a microservice, that kind of thing. Really not the case, yeah. A lot of people are saying it's like the Gartner thing, mode 2 and mode 1. So mode 1 is kind of our old crafty apps, and then we build new stuff on top of that in mode 2. It's an interesting idea. A lot of people have said really need at least 3 kind of stages to transition from old to new. And you also need some form of transformation plan. Else what you're doing is we call systems engagement, the kind of stuff on the web, mode 2 stuff, is limited by the systems of record, your old mainframes, all these kind of things. And if you're not careful, you're chucking all this microservices in front of mainframes, you're rubbing some DEVOPS on it, and really it's just lipstick on the pig. Do you know what I mean? You're not really tackling the core problem in your architecture. And I know that's hard sometimes. I know legacy systems are really hard to break down, but don't just chuck stuff on top. It literally is lipstick on a pig. It looks good, but it won't really last very long. I've already mentioned DevOps, but I'm seeing a lot of people, not really having a well-defined DevOps strategy, and I think it's important for things like microservices. If you can't do continuous delivery or continuous integration, definitely, you're going to have a hard time with microservices. What used to be 1 thing is now going to be 2, it's going to be 3, it's going to be 4, in terms of the services you create and you deploy. I've also seen some people think DevOps is basically a developer with root access, and it's definitely not, so please don't do that. Yeah, DevOps is more about a cultural thing than that. You can see Martin. Okay. So, moving on. Evaluation, the fitness functions are really useful. If I'm going to be bringing in a new paradigm, particularly bringing in new technology, you can use this kind of thing. You can create axes there. So we have an axis like auditability, configurability, data security, high availability. I can draw out the axis I want to evaluate the thing on. So this is NoSQL, draw my axis, and then I give myself half the total number of points available on the axes and draw my idealized sort of fitness function. Does that make sense? So there's 5 on each of these things, might be 8 of the actual axes. I give myself say 20 points and try and draw what I want. Bonus is, I'll skip on that. Not only does it give us some frame of reference for how to evaluate things, because we can go to the market and draw the kind of fitness functions of what we see. Fitness function of Mongo, fitness function of Cassandra, fitness function of Postgres, that kind of thing. It's great for evaluation purposes, but it gives documentation. At the time we chose Postgres, this is what we valued in terms of fitness for our application. Yeah, really nice technique. I did skip a bit. This is actually based, I borrowed this from Neil Ford and Ben Parsons from ThoughtWorks. They've got a new book coming out called Evolutionary Architecture, which microservices are kind of the first promise of that. Yeah, you can no longer, or you can avoid rather getting locked into one tech stack with multiple services, and you can evolve your architecture. I'm sure, again, many of you worked on a monolith. It's really hard to evolve your architecture when it's just 1 thing. Yeah, you can't really change platforms, for example. Make sure you're having the right conversations around evaluation as well. Yeah, so this is a model. I won't go into loads for time reasons now, but it's a great model. Have a look online. It's not my work. It's called the spine model. I bumped into it last year, I think it was, and it talks about as a species, we're very much a tool-using species. Yeah, that's what separates us from our nearest sort of evolutionary ancestors. But we get stuck, particularly in tech sometimes, where equally plausible options are available, and then we get a bit dogmatic. I program in Java, I program in Go at the moment, yeah. And I do frequently see, oh, Go's better, Java's better. And that's a dogmatic conversation. Do you know what I mean? You step up. The idea is, if you're talking about tools like Docker, Rocket, Java, Go, that kind of thing, you might need to step up this spine model to make sure you're having the right conversations. So I might value a strong development tool chain. Therefore, Java is a really good fit. I might value really lightweight, applications that I can deploy into a Scratch kind of Linux container. Then Go is probably a better fit. But you need to be having the right conversations, yeah? If you can't figure out practices, you need like, what is our company value? You value time to market over, reliability or something like that. You can make sure you're having the right evaluation conversations at the right level. And the conversations make for effective collaboration, yeah? A bit more detail here, put in the slide, you can have a look at sort of how it walks through some of the values, core principles, that kind of thing. So vendors are going to try and trick you all the time. Particularly with microservices now, I'm actually seeing vendors popping out saying, we do a microservice platform, we do a microservice communication thing, great stuff. But be careful, they might be trying to trick, it's probably a hard word or a cruel word, but they're trying to get you to use their product, yeah. So I want to test like a bit of audience participation. Apologies if you don't mind, but I'll share the results. Give me 3 options: top line's bigger, bottom line's bigger, and the same size. Now who thinks the top line is bigger? We've got about 3, 4, 5 people, a bit more perhaps. And who thinks the bottom line's bigger? 0. Who thinks they're both the same size? That's the majority of the room. Now what I've actually done is I've tricked you into the top line. Be aware of this, vendors and people like me will try and trick you all the time. Yeah? So, and as technologists, we like to think we're right, we like to think we're clever. And that's a massive generalization, I would say. I definitely fell victim to that. If I feel clever, the vendors kind of gives me an easy win. I'm like, yeah, I won over the vendor. And then they sneak in some other stuff. You know what I mean? So be aware of this stuff. This is a fantastic book. It's not particularly easy to read, but Thinking Fast and Slow talks about bias and heuristics. And when I read that book about 5 years ago, changed my life. Like straight up, that is probably one of the only books I'll say like changed my life. That book really did change my life. In terms of heuristics and bias, like anchoring bias, like your manager says to you, that's going to take 2 days, yeah? You anchor on that 2 day figure, that kind of thing. And this book is just fantastic. Anyway, be aware vendors might try and trick you in terms of evaluation. On to the second sin, quickly, gluttony. How are we doing for time? I'm checking, that's good. So communication lock-in. So I'm seeing a lot of people being really anti-RPC, remote procedure call. And I get it. Anyone's used RMI here back in the day? Yeah. Let's see if you have hands for that. RMI was a real pain. I don't know if people have used it, but and people I think are a little bit wary of the lock-in, the perceived lock-in with things like gRPC, Google's RPC. In my experience, sometimes the contract, like gRPC is what they call an interface definition language. So you have a contract in comparison with, say, JSON, it's kind of free form. Sometimes the contract's actually really good. You can obviously do contracts with JSON, don't get me wrong, but like the actual contract, the binary contract is really interesting with things like Thrift and gRPC. The speed is good. HTTP2 will alleviate some of these problems, but in general, JSON going over the wire, not only is it more data going over the wire compared to a binary protocol, but the serialization cost is a massive hit. I think I've seen some great talks in the past from LJC people, but check it out online. But yeah, serializing and deserializing JSON is like super costly. Yeah? So gRPC kicks ass in terms of speed. Looking for interesting videos online, Google Kelsey Hightower or Ray Tan. They're both from Google, and they both do like very unbiased, very good talks about gRPC. I might say it's like this is constantly evaluating, but constantly changing. But stick to REST on the front end. It's kind of principle of least surprise if you're developing an app. You kind of at the moment expect REST-like interfaces. WebSocket's becoming a bit more popular. There's even gRPC clients for Android and stuff now, so you might see that on the front end. But I actually like, maybe use RPC, gRPC internally in a microservice system, but I would stick to using REST at the kind of sort of the edge of your services. Edge of your system, I should say. So, enterprise service buses. Who's used enterprise service buses here? Kind of I'm in the same hands as the RMI. So, enterprise service buses, like as an architect, and a consultant, I get brought in a lot of times, and people show me they've got some major problems, not scaling, blah blah blah, and they go, "This is our architecture." And as soon as I see that, I'm like, "Oh man, like that is not an architecture. Yeah, that's just someone doing like everything comes into this bus thing here, yeah." And that it looks fantastic from an architectural diagram point of view, but I know as soon as I crank open that enterprise bus, I'm going to find some crazy kind of communication stuff. Yeah, I'm probably going to find some policies, and I'm probably going to find some auditing as well. Usually pretty crazy. Yeah? Enterprise service buses, awesome technology, do a lot of magic, and unfortunately, people just push more and more stuff into them and walked away, and they're really hard to debug, really hard to evolve in new systems. But if you imagine, like, enterprise service buses are deployed typically behind the firewall. They are like the spine of your kind of communication internally. If we were to move the system boundary a little bit, now we've got some services at the front there, some services back. This is your system boundary, your perimeter, if you like. What's it change a few of these names to website A, iOS mobile app, third-party data feed, and these different services back here? That to me looks kind of similar. Is it an ESB or is it an API gateway? Yeah. People sort of bumped into API gateways. They are very interesting in general. Be careful. As a pattern, I think they're freaking awesome. The idea being is you do a lot of like cross-cutting concerns here with your websites, your mobile apps. Things like security, rate limiting, like Kong is really interesting, Apogee, AWS have got their own thing. Really cool pattern, really cool tool, but I'm starting to see it being abused in the space, and people are kind of treating it like an enterprise service bus, chucking more and more stuff into the kind of front end, and then it's really hard to figure out what's going on at times. Just be aware of that. What I would say is an enterprise service bus is not the same as an event bus. There's a term popping up in like event bus, like I know Akka's got an event bus, Vertex, seeing a lot of like Scala stuff. It's very, Seneca.js, a JavaScript framework, very interesting frameworks. Fred George is an awesome talk which I've shared there for you. These are not to be confused with enterprise service buses. They typically use very lightweight messaging, like Kafka or Kinesis. Not saying that's amazing technology, it's interesting technology. It's like a durable message queue, kind of like Rabbit on steroids a little bit, but not like a database. It's not persistent like a database. It's only durable. But you can do some really funny stuff, and you can plug in basically and look for patterns. So you have this event bus communication like going across there, and you can basically register, I'm interested in these kind of messages. And then when you see the message, you read it off the wire, you do some stuff and put another message back. Really cool pattern. For certain scenarios, it's a really good pattern, but very loosely coupled and very kind of asynchronous in nature. Again, definitely not a panacea, but I wanted to mention it's not the same thing as an ESB. Some people have said it is, it's not. Really cool, very much check them out. On to the third thing, really, wrapping through. So this is about organizational stuff, and I'm sure many of you have heard of Conway's Law, been to Microservices talk, like always there, Conway's Law. I've seen it enough times now to realize it is a thing. Conway's Law basically says your software will kind of look like your communication instructions in the organization. And if you don't talk to, dev don't talk to ops, and ops don't talk to QA, a whole bunch of problems we all know and love there, or know and hate, I suppose. Microservices are truly as much about people as they are about tech, and you need to kind of get your business, get your organization ready. So at Open Credo, we do a lot of consultancy gigs, and at the moment we're hearing this a lot. We go in and we say, people ring us up and say, I'm stuck with microservices, need some help. And I say, cool, we like to look at a holistic thing, Open Credo, more about getting the problem rather than the solution up front. The solution comes later. We say, what's the problem? Oh, we look at some technical issues. We say, can we have a look at your organization? Can we have a look how developers are working with ops, that kind of stuff? Like, no, we're all good with the team, the people stuff. Our teams are built around squads, chapters, and guilds. We're good. Anyone know where that comes from? Shout out? Spotify. Cool, yeah, beware of cargo copying. Beware of blindly copying things, yeah? I've literally seen some people rebrand Scrum teams as squads, chapters with line managers, and guilds. I think they had a presentation once a month over lunch. That's not squads, chapters, and guilds. That's exactly what you've got already. Yeah, Spotify do amazing things, but you need to understand the practices, the principles, and the values that led to why they created these things, rather than just trying to blindly copy some kind of communication structure. Yeah, really important stuff. And for me, you're going to be banging on about this quite a lot in other conferences. But empathy is a key thing. Yeah, and more and more people, I'm getting it from other conferences I go to. I did this one at CraftConf, I think. I'll put the link in it for you. But empathizing with your fellow developer, empathizing with ops people in your team, QA people, empathizing with the business, and definitely empathizing with your customer. Super valuable stuff. Yeah, you are building software for other people with other people. Yeah, empathy is a really important thing. So, stop getting lazy with non-functional requirements. So yeah, non-functional requirements, they're a bit of a misnamed thing. I've seen many systems that were not functional because of non-functional requirements. Makes sense? Yeah. They look amazing, they don't work in terms of performance. Yeah. So the driving technical requirements for a system should be identified early to ensure they are properly handled in the subsequent design. Just say that one again, that's really important for me. It comes from reading stuff on evolutionary architecture. The driving technical requirements for a system should be identified early to ensure they are properly handled. Yeah. How many times has someone told you, build a fast system? How much security do you want? I want it secure. So what does that even mean? Yeah, that's really hard to quantify. So these are things, the abilities, all availability, scalability stuff can often be an afterthought in software in general, yeah. And people sort of push back to me sometimes and say, we're agile, we're lean, we delay decisions to the last responsible moment. And the last responsible moment is a really powerful thing when done right. It basically means if you're heading for some kind of decision, the last responsible moment is the moment you can make it before a decision is made for you. Something happens that basically forces one of those paths. It's really powerful for just-in-time kind of decision making. But the problem is, in kind of newsflash, sometimes the last responsible moment is up front, yeah, on the whiteboard. Yeah? This escapes a lot of people, I think. And I've definitely been there in my career. But I'm realizing now, working on large-scale systems, working on mission-critical systems, you have to think about these kind of abilities up front. Yeah? And microservices don't make this any easier. My experience in terms of, because I should say that it can be costly to adapt later in the project, and microservices don't necessarily make this easier. I've actually seen some security and tried to retrofit security in a microservice system, and it was like N times harder, because we now had to have like some kind of CAS system that was distributed, authentication, and we had to like make sure all the microservices were like were following like when people are logged in, logged out. Yeah, up front it would have been hard. Like after the fact, it was like near impossible to do. Yeah. So microservices do not solve the need to think about like non-functional requirements up front. Right? Is my kind of get on my high horse a little bit there. But Sam Newman, I'm sure many of you know Sam's work. It's like he's an amazing book for O'Reilly, prolific speaker. I see him on the circuit a lot. He's doing an awesome talk at Access to Microservices. You can check it out. He's doing a new and improved version of this talk here in about 2 months' time at MooCon. So please do have a look on the website. MooCon conference run and organised by Skills Matter. I've been last like 2 or 3 years. It's an amazing conference. People like Sam, a bunch of interesting people. Greg Young coming along this year. Really interesting people. And the only keynote is about AppSec and microservices. Highly recommend it. If you're doing anything with Docker, I bumped into a guy called Aaron Gratifiore at DockerCon this year, and I wrote up this thing for InfoQ. Aaron's done this crazy good white paper around security issues with containers, Docker, Rocket, LXD, that kind of thing. A lot of us now are deploying things in Docker, so please do check out Aaron's talk and his white paper. It's not an easy read, but it's a fount of knowledge when it comes to container security. And containers, when done wrong, it's very easy to do daft things. Yeah, it's like giving root literally on our host sometimes. Be careful of that stuff. I've been not in production yet. So it's important to get non-functional requirement testing in the pipeline. I'm hoping many of you are sort of doing continuous integration, continuous delivery. Maybe you've got a Jenkins, Bamboo, Team City, Circle CI, take your pick. I use a lot like Gatling and JMeter. I'm loving Gatling at the moment, actually, for doing performance testing. Really cool, Scala-based, but it's like Scala. Even if you don't want to learn Scala, you can totally, you know enough as Java developer because you know enough Scala to do awesome Gatling stuff. Very powerful, much easier than JMeter in terms of pricing. You can then run a Gatling or JMeter in something called Flood.io, which is a commercial service, but if you want to do large-scale load testing, Flood.io is really useful. Security testing, for me, excuse me, security testing is becoming more and more important. I think it's one of those, unfortunately, it's one of those things that's kind of building up, and it's going to take some major issue for us to suddenly have a lot of impact in IT. We're going to probably be regulated by the government, or there's going to be some new organizations spun up. Like security is unfortunately quite lax, I think, in our industry. And that's partly our own fault for not pushing back to product owners and stuff and saying, we need to take time to learn these things. We need to take time to build security into applications. But things like find set bugs, I'm sure many of you use find bugs. This is the security version of find bugs, really cool. OWASP dependency check is a Maven plugin. It looks for critical vulnerabilities in your Maven and build artifacts and stuff, really cool. BDD security is what it says in the tin. It's a BDD style for defining security rules. So you can say, given I set my threshold to low and I try and do a SQL injection attack, then this happens. Given when, then with security. And it's basically on OWASP Zap. Zap is basically a tool, or it comes with an IDE for running attacks on websites. Freaking amazing tool. There's a couple of good talk videos coming out Java 1, and I definitely recommend on YouTube. Arachne, if you've got a very JavaScript JavaScript heavy front end, Arachne is a better choice for attacking your application via the JavaScript way. Looking at things like session manipulation, man-in-the-middle attacks, SSL issues, this is really good stuff. Gauntlet and server spec, you can do them, put them in the build pipeline for your infrastructure to assert properties in your infrastructure. Have you disabled sudo, for example? Are you using user namespaces on containers, all that good stuff? And Docker Bench for security, Aqua, they've got plugins. Docker Bench is you run it on the host to check the host is secure for running Docker containers, and Aqua is a plugin to do assertions on the images that you're producing as part of your build pipeline. A little shameless plug, I'm writing a mini book for O'Reilly about continuous delivery Docker and Java. It's coming out in about a month's time, and all these references and more will be in that book as well, so you can check that out.
Daniel, could I just quickly? Sorry, could we just try switching mics to the to Daniel's laptop mic instead?
Yep. Okay, so we're going to do a slight technical change. We're going to mute the mic on this one. Could you activate one on this one? All right, doing that now, Simon.
Awesome, thanks. If that's better, I'll buy Daniel's book.
Hello, hello.
Hey, I think that's better. Thank you.
That one. Sweet.
And you may need to stand a little bit closer to your laptop. Sorry to cage you in.
Yeah. Okay. Is that any better, Simon?
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Sorry, I'll stand it. I love moving around, so it's going to be hard. Raf, yeah, blowing up when bad things happen. So previous talk, I talked about basically using Release It. Awesome book. Release It talks about things like circuit breakers, bulkheads, timeouts, retries. It inspired a lot of stuff that went into the Netflix Chaos Army stuff, like HEURISTICS and all that kind of good stuff. So if you're sort of advanced, use things like Simian Army. If you're just getting into the space, have a look at the Release It book. It's not too big. This time I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to look at technical pain points around distributed transactions. So the advice for distributed transactions in a microservice system is basically don't. Yeah. Next slide. No, I'm just kidding. Where possible, don't. Don't, anyone's used distributed transactions, XTA, that kind of stuff. You pay a hit basically in terms of performance and throughput, bunch of things for making the developer model simpler. Yeah, it's like you do transactions over a whole bunch of distributed things. You can freeze the world, and your world is very simple to manipulate as a developer, but you pay a massive cost in terms of performance. Yeah, so I think we as developers have to get over the mindset of needing transactions in all the places. Transactions, really powerful, but in reality, things like banks don't even use transactions in the way we think they do. They do a lot of stuff in batch overnight, that kind of stuff. So we as developers, I find this really hard. Coming from a relational database background, find this really hard. But yeah, don't push transactional scope into a single service where possible. If you really need distributed transactions, things like the supervisor, process manager pattern is really good, and that's a classic enterprise integration pattern. Things like the Saga pattern are the new and trendy way of doing things. So it's kind of you provide a workflow, and it's a bit like the command pattern. Anyone familiar with the classic command pattern? You provide some kind of rollback. It's not perfect, it's not ACID by any means, it's more a kind of base model, as they call it, basically available soft state eventual consistency, as opposed to ACID being very much like, boom, that's a snapshot of the world. But think about things in a different way is what I'm going to encourage you to do. I found this really hard. Hands up, yeah, on this one. Changing gears a little bit, pain points around people, DevOps. How does DevOps fit into microservices? And I think the answer is it's pretty much a prerequisite. The snag is DevOps means many things to many people. Yeah, that's the challenge. So what I'm going to recommend, for me, it's a lot about mixing technology and culture. The cultural side, check out Matthew Skelton, his webpage. He's an awesome guy from London, runs the London Continuous Delivery Meetup, good guy. And he talks about, in the red there is anti-patterns, and in the blue is good patterns of DevOps in an organization. So one of the anti-patterns, for example, is the DevOps team in the middle of DevOps. That's like, I've seen that one. And one of the anti-patterns is Dev don't need ops, that kind of thing. And then he talks about ways, maybe you can use a temporary team to establish DevOps, that kind of thing. I'm not going to do it justice. It's a great website. Please do check it out. Book-wise, I'm sure as you're guessing already with the number of book references, I'm an avid book reader. I live in Guildford, so I have quite a long commute. These books are for me, and these are awesome books. Site Reliability Engineering gives a sort of insight into Google's methodology. I would caveat by saying it's not a fit for everyone. Google are unicorns, yeah, I love them dearly, but they do things very differently than a lot of us. And I get to see as a consultant, many people copying Google and not always doing it quite right. So read the book, but don't, blindly copy the patterns is what I'm saying. Keith's book, or Infrastructure as Code, is like my go-to reference now. If you want to get into, 10 minutes, if you want to get into ops, it's totally recommended, like in terms of talk about Terraform, Ansible, Chef, Puppet, all that good stuff. So yeah, those are good. And Jennifer's book is more around the cultural side, the one with the yak on the side, a bit of yak shaving. That's an awesome book for understanding culture. So there's this notion around DevOps of this full stack engineer myth. And when I joined, when I joined IT 15 years ago, full stack meant front end, back end. I did JavaScript, I did JavaScript, I did Java. I was a full stack engineer. These days, full stack frequently means you're doing ops as well and QA. It's getting a bit crazy actually. The problem is, like, I saw this great talk by Charity Majors at CraftConf, and she said this actually. I'm sorry, but if you're not designing the computer chips and writing the website, then I don't want to hear from you as a full stack developer. Yeah, and I think that for me kind of sums it up. Yeah, as in, like, you can't do everything. Yeah, you gotta define your responsibilities. What I'm seeing a lot of at the moment is, and I'm going to channel my inner Colin Humphreys. Anyone who knows Colin, that'll be quite a challenge. But we see a lot of this kind of stuff. People like building their own microservice platform. Yeah, there's things out there like Cloud Foundry, like Kubernetes, Deus, take your pick, that can get you started rather than people going all in, building your own platform. A couple of years ago, it was the only thing we had to do. I've built a couple of platforms for sure, but these days, things like Kubernetes in particular, great way to jumpstart stuff. Cloud Foundry, even easier to get started with Java. For us as developers, I think focus on what matters. And for me as a developer, what matters is things like CI/CD, mechanical sympathy, kind of understanding the fabric I'm deploying onto, be it cloud, be it containers, and thinking about things like logging and monitoring as well. Really important. So rushing through, because I've only got, like 10 more minutes, less than 10 minutes now. Envy is about the shared single domain and data store fallacy, yeah? Previously, I talked a lot about domain-driven design stuff. Like one model in the old world was the way to do it. When you had the monolith, one model, perfect. Microservices, it actually introduces coupling if you have just one model. Try and perhaps share your model via a Maven artifact. And I've done that. It really doesn't go well when you change things. Knowing your domain-driven design really helps with microservices. We talk about the Blue Book and the Red Book quite a lot. They're not particularly easy reads. I would say this, the newer version, is an easier read. I only stumbled on this one recently, so shout out to my colleague Andrew Morgan for pointing me in this direction. And this is an easier read in terms of mapping domain-driven design concepts to microservices. Definitely recommend it. If you're looking to understand your domain model, which I work with a lot of companies looking to migrate from a monolith to microservices, and it's evident on the first day of brainstorming that they don't actually know their domain model anymore. Excuse me. It's, over the years, it's kind of atrophied or they've lost sight of the bigger picture. Things like context mapping come straight from domain-driven design. I use this technique a lot. Haven't got time to go into it now, but it's a really good technique for encouraging discussions. Almost guaranteed when I do this technique, within 5 minutes, there's an argument breaks out in the team. No, this one's connected to this one. That one doesn't go there. And it's a great discussion point. I always put it next to the architecture diagrams on projects I work on. Highly recommended. Event storming is kind of the dynamic way of doing this. You talk about events in the business. I haven't done this lots, but my colleagues at Open Credo, in particular Lorenzo, talks a lot about this as being a really cool technique. So those kind of static and dynamic views of your systems, understanding your domains is really important if you're going to rebuild in microservices, yeah? Little hat tip, that if you are going to do microservices, you often hear of polyglot persistence. I can use Cassandra, I can use Neo4j, and that's great. Be aware operationally, that's going to add a burden to you and your team. Running Cassandra is not like running Postgres. Running Neo is not like running Postgres. We're seeing in Open Credo a heck of a lot of stuff at the moment where people are treating Cassandra like a relational database, modeling the data. Doesn't scale like that, for example, in the way you model your data. We're seeing a lot of people building graph databases in MySQL when they have never heard of Neo4j, that kind of stuff, or Titan built on top of Cassandra. So and Hazelcast is amazing for distributed processing. If you're looking to do distributed transactions, Hazelcast, you can often get around this stuff by doing distributed processing. So again, I'm not going to talk about that loads, come and chat to me afterwards, but choose and use data stores appropriately and be aware of the operational burden of bringing new things into the stack, for your operators, your fellow operators. Quickly, pride testing in the world of transients. I've talked previously, this is an awesome article about microservice testing. Microservice testing is genuinely really hard, I find. It's a paradigm shift, often for the QA team. That no longer is there one thing they set up and they poke and prod, now it's many things. So I've talked about local verification in the previous talk, which is online on InfoQ now, so you can watch that one at your leisure. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about something that's kind of important to me at the moment, which is service virtualization. Hence the Spectre reference earlier. We're doing a lot of work around this. No product pitch though. Service virtualization basically allows you to record requests and responses. Some of you may have used things like VCR, Betamax, Wiremock does similar kind of things. Really cool technique for if you want to put something in your build pipeline that you cannot reliably call out to. Maybe it disappears every so often, maybe it's expensive to run, maybe it doesn't, you can't deterministically simulate failures. So using service virtualization, you can basically virtualize, you can fake the service, and then do fun stuff and check your application handles failure. You can do things with, like, I think I've actually got on the next slide. There's an article link there if you're interested in learning more. These are an article my colleagues and I wrote recently. In terms of actual tools for this, there's the classics, kind of old school tools, CA, HPE. New kids on the block, think HOVERFLY, which I'm working on, Wiremark, I know Chris talks about Wiremark quite a lot, Saboteur, Tom Akerst is the author of that, London-based guy, super cool guy, will always be happy to help you over a cheeky beer. So if you want to know more about Wiremark, you can reach out to him as well. And VCR Betamax are kind of older. Mountebank's interesting, node-based virtualizer, and Mirage is a Python-based virtualizer as well. The tool I'm working on at the moment is HOVERFLY. It's an open source tool. Check it out in the repo. It's Apache 2 license, written in Go for performance reasons. I didn't write it. One of my colleagues wrote it. And we're using it for HTTP and HTTPS simulations. So kind of, we got up here, you can see the client application on the left and the external service we're testing against, or it can also be another service in your stack. HOVERFLY sits as a proxy in the middle, and you can record the requests and record the requests and the responses. You can then remove the external service, and in your build pipeline or locally, for example, you can issue requests, and if they match, you get the response back without the external service being there. Kind of funky. I was developing on a plane the other day, no Wi-Fi, 38,000 feet, coding against the GitHub API because I'd done the record and request, record and response. That's quite cool. The cool thing with HOVERFLY is you've got stuff called middleware, and you can inject in basically things like in a pipeline fashion in the requests and responses. So you can remove personally identified information. If you're recording, say, production traffic, you can remove credit card numbers, that kind of thing. You can rate limit stuff. The really cool thing, though, with middleware is when you start putting it in parallel, but in the simulate mode. And then what you can do is basically some kind of chaos monkey style stuff. So we use this to test our circuit breakers. We use it to inject latency and see what happens to the overall system. So we spin up one system with all these virtual dependent services, and then we basically simulate latency in them in a deterministic fashion and see what happens to our system under test. Really cool stuff. A couple of the modes there, which I'm not going to talk about because, yeah, they're not so important. We've got a JUnit rule. It's open source again. We'd love feedback on if this is useful to you. We're chatting to Tom Akerst quite a bit around the Wiremark stuff as well, so do check out those kind of things. How are we doing for time, guys? I think it's like two minutes, like super quickly then. What I'm going to say is I went to Java 1 last week. Awesome conference, as always. I appreciate not everyone can get to it, though. And so these are my sort of highlights from Java 1. Reactive microservices, sounds like a total buzzword, but it was like a stone-cold, awesome talk. Slides are online. You can check it out later. Spring Cloud Contract is really good for consumer-based contracts. Things like Pacto. Spring Cloud Contract is the Spring way of doing it. It's super cool. We're actually working with the guys to do some HOVERFLY integration as well. Got to shout out Micro Profile. This is Java EE initiative around microservices. So Martin at the back there has been doing some work on this as well. The LJC, SuJava, Tommy Tribe, bunch of awesome people getting together trying to come up with some sort of standardized approaches to sharing knowledge and then protocols and things like that in the microservice, in the Java EE microservice space. Really good. Peter Lowry has talked a lot about high-performance microservices. Definitely check that out. I had to put my tweet up. I couldn't find his link to his slides, so hopefully people will tweet at him saying share the slides. These were 4 really good talks there. They're online on YouTube. Again, slide deck will be shared in a minute. Awesome talk about Gatling by the J-Point guys. Got to shout them out. That was really good as well. So these you can all get and watch at your leisure. I'll share the slides later. Super quick. These were the 7 deadly sins of microservices. I won't recap due to timings. What I would say is I'm an avid book reader. These are my recommendations for books. If you're looking to read more, the microservices on the right there, kind of more like Eberhard's book and the Irresistible APIs are more practical style microservice books. These are more business ones, designing delivery after business value, and sort of more architecture and testing, final ones. 2 new ones coming out, super interesting. Production-ready microservices from O'Reilly. Just got hold of the manuscript now and reviewing it, and it looks really interesting. Written by Susan Fowler from Uber, so she's got some really cool thoughts. And also got a shout out the guys from, I don't think where they're from now. They're doing testing Java microservices, Arquillian. Alex Soto, sorry, almost forgot Alex's name. There's some interesting chats with Alex around this stuff. He's really ahead of the game, and there's a couple other people writing the book as well. So it's available on early access on Manning. So if you're doing a lot of Java EE, a lot of Spring, this could be a very interesting book to understand testing as well. Appreciate I sped up quite a lot at the end. Hopefully that will make sense. If not, you can come and see me afterwards. There is a recording of a very similar talk I've done online, which I can share with you, where I do talk a bit slower, or you can even watch me in half speed as well. So it's all good. Thanks a lot, guys.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much to Daniel. I'm sure we can all agree that was really interesting. So we are also down in the bar. We have a tab behind the bar. Daniel, I think, will be available to answer some questions, definitely. Feel free to join us. My colleagues, Jacob and Alan at the back, are more than happy to direct you if you have not been here before. So we hope to see you downstairs, and thank you all very much for coming. Thank you.
Thanks to Vija.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So yeah, I think we've got a question on the VJUG. Are you there, Daniel?
Thank you.
Hey, you there? Can you hear me?
Copy of the slide before?
Yeah, so I've got to do a few tweaks on them. I'm going to put them on my slide share tonight. All right, so I can't share them now, but there's commercial stuff in it at the moment. All right, so but what I'll tweet out tonight. So if you, I don't know if you got my Twitter handle or my slide share.
I don't have your Twitter handle. So would you have a card? I haven't. Would you have your Twitter handle? Yeah, no problem at all. Let me just remove the mic.
Yeah, I'll get home back.
Sign up to your Twitter handle. Like, don't be scared. You know.
No worries.
Alan, can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. I'll give you a spec go lab as well. So Twitter handle's on the bottom there. And I'll tweet out tonight and pop along SlideShare and any questions.
One thing I wanted to ask.
Okay, so it looks like the guys can't hear us over there anymore. But massive thank you to Daniel Bryant. And I don't think there are any questions actually in the Hangouts. So let me just double check. Sorry, not in the Hangouts. I'm not sure there are any questions in IRC at the minute. So so what I'll do is we'll have a break there. Let me just mention we are officially halfway through.